Hey sub-theories! This is part 2 of our theory on the Masked Man, or Crogan, and you can watch part 1 by clicking the annotation up in the corner of the screen. Today we'll be talking about theories about the possible role that Crogan might play in Season 5 of Race to the Edge, which is due to come out sometime in the latter half of 2017. Let's get started. As established in our last video, Crogan is a close advisor of Drago Bloodfist, sent to the archipelago to not only acquire business relations with Vigo Grimborn to secure more dragons for his army, but to scout out the area and pave the way for Drago's army to move west and take over. But what role will he play in the upcoming Season 5 of Race to the Edge? The prevailing theory at the moment is that Crogan will replace Vigo and Riker after the events of Shell-Shocked Part 2, which, spoilers, okay? You're still here? Alright, let's go. Where there was a little bit of a hiccup if Vigo's plans, get it? Cause hiccup. Though I'd like to interject here that I'm not personally entirely convinced that, either of them have quite copped it. Anyways, there is actually a good amount of evidence to suggest that Crogan will go on to become the villain. Number 1, Race to the Edge takes place a year before the second movie happens, and the creators have said that the series will definitely set the scene for the events that happen during the second movie. And we've already seen a number of other clues to this. Thematically, we've already seen Hiccup engage and fight dragon hunters who exploit and control dragons for profit, just like Drago. In fact, in Shell-Shocked Part 2, we see that Riker uses similarly abusive methods to control the Shellfire as Drago uses to control the Bewilderbeast in the second movie. And Race to the Edge has also been a maturing story for Hiccup, as we see him evolve into the confident leader that he becomes and we see in the second movie. And on top of that, we see Hickson becoming a thing. 'Cause true love. To have the final villain of Race to the Edge be a close advisor of Drago's would be really quite fitting. The series could end with Crogan being defeated, but Hiccup learning about a dark, mysterious, more powerful man out there who has set his eyes on the archipelago. Just imagine that dark terror, that feeling that there's this villain on the horizon and he doesn't quite know who it is or when they're coming. How perfect would that be? Number 2, Vigo was actually mentioned and foreshadowed by the Dragon Hunters and Riker, the season before he actually became the main antagonist of the show. When he finally became Hiccup's most formidable opponent yet, instead of Riker, we already knew how badass he was. He was smart and poetic, like an accountant that hasn't yet had their dreams crushed, or a law student that hasn't quite resigned themselves to the life of processing mortgages. Crogan has been introduced as a stealthy, wealthy, badass fighter that can take down the Dragon Hunters and Riker all by himself, before slipping away into the darkness and not being seen again. We saw he could slip away without anyone noticing in both Midnight Scrum and Last Auction Heroes. So Crogan, just like Vigo, well, we've come to know how badass and dangerous he could be in the season before he really becomes the main villain. Following that pattern, it would make sense for him to become the next primary antagonist. But there is a second theory, and it's actually the one that I personally believe in. Crogan is going to turn out good. Now, there's not a lot to go off because we've actually seen so little of him, but hear me out. It makes sense when you consider the events of How to Train Your Dragon 2. Crogan clearly doesn't understand how much of a threat Hiccup and the Dragon Riders really could be to Drago. If he did, then he wouldn't have just been willing to hand over Hiccup, the leader of the Riders, to Riker for some bounty money. But if Crogan became the main villain of Season 5, then he would definitely come to understand how much of a threat Hiccup and the Riders are. And he would definitely let Drago know about the Riders with the freaking fireballs and the power of friendship and how they're gonna stand in his way. But he doesn't. We saw in the second movie that Drago doesn't have a single clue about who or what the Dragon Riders are. It was all like, hey Eret, you got some riders there. With the chokey. I think it's quite possible we'll see him start off as a villain reporting to Drago, but as he comes to interact with the Riders, he'll actually change sides. But there's a couple of other questions that I would really like to be answered, because something interesting happens in Midnight Scrum when Crogan goes to hand Hiccup over to Riker. Not only is Crogan wearing a mask, but when Riker asks him who he is, he refuses to answer. He pushes away the question kitchen and impatiently demands the gold to be on his way. Thing is, he was the special guest at Vigo's dragon auction. Riker and Vigo already know what he looks like and presumably who he is working for. But more than that, when Hiccup eventually unmasks him during the fight and recognizes him as well from being the guy at the auction, he doesn't actually seem nearly as bothered. So this is the question: why would Crogan feel the need to hide who he is from the Dragon Hunters and Riker? Also, why would he need the money? We saw how damn rich he was at the auction. Why would he stoop to being a bounty hunter? Oh, so many questions. Finally, at the end of Midnight Scrum, Crogan actually takes out Riker by throwing Hiccup's leg at him to stop him from killing him with a knife in the back. He then kind of laughs a little bit and then flees, but he's still saved Hiccup's life. If he was perfectly willing to just hand over Hiccup to Riker and Vigo, who he probably knew were intending to kill him, then why would he care about saving Hiccup's life? All of these questions tend to imply to me that there's a lot more to him that we don't know, that perhaps he has a good streak in him that is gonna come out in the next series. And hopefully, hopefully, these will all be answered in the next season. But that's all from me, Subfuries. My question to you is, what do you think that Crogan will be doing in the next season? Let me know in the comments below. In the meantime, feel free to follow me on Twitter, Wattpad, Facebook, send me stuff that you might have made in the address, or email me at the links in the description below. Stay nerdy, Subfuries, and I'll see you in the future.